until half an hour or so. We're going to have a couple more speakers, a couple Green Party members. We also have Representative John Kafalis with us today. He just showed up a few minutes ago, so he's out there somewhere. Say hi to him. He's going to also speak a little bit later, so please stick around for that. And right now we have Russ Hopkins. I like the fact he wrote a song called Hell No, We Won't Blow Without a Fight about the uranium mining over in Colorado. So that's pretty cool too. So let's give a hand for Russ.
What's happening in the Gulf is not only an environmental disaster and an economic disaster, but it's a political disaster caused because the biggest corporations are acting hand in hand with our government. And one of the reasons for that, part of the problem, now it's only part of the problem, but it is an important part of it, is that our election system narrows down our choices to two major parties, both of which are dominated on the national level by big money. I have to say, at the local level, many Democrats are progressive. Most of my friends are Democrats. And our elected representatives who are Democrats are very progressive. And the Democratic Party platform is progressive. But somehow the higher you go up the food chain of the Democratic Party, the more corporate it becomes. Because they figure they can move to the right, and who are people like us going to vote for anyway? I mean, it's the Democrat or the Republican. We don't want to elect the Republican, so we're going to vote for the Democrat no matter how far to the right they get. And therefore, our political system keeps getting farther and farther to the right. Now, the kind of election system we have is called plurality voting. And I know it's hard for us as Americans to realize that that's only one kind of election system, because we tend to assume the way we do things was the way it's done around the world. And it probably came down from Mount Sinai and stone tablets. But it actually is one way of voting. Whoever gets the most votes wins. Now, that works if there's only two candidates. The problem is if you have three or more candidates, the vote gets divided up, and nobody may get a majority. And worse, you don't really know who the majority supports because the vote's divided up three ways. And what's worse is that system of plurality voting deters candidates from running because of the so-called spoiler effect. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say you're a progressive, pro-environment, pro-union candidate, and you're thinking of running for office. There's already a centrist Democrat running and a very conservative Republican running for office. So if you run, you're likely to take votes away from that centrist Democrat and help that really conservative Republican win. Well, you don't want to do that, so either you don't run at all, or you do wind up running, and therefore you help elect your least favorite candidate. So that's a real problem with our election system. It really prevents people from running, and it works against progressive candidates who aren't part of a big money machine. Now, there is a way out of the spoiler effect trap, and it's called instant runoff voting or ranked voting. How does it work? We say it's literally as easy as 1, 2, 3. Instead of just picking one candidate on the ballot, you rank your candidates in preference order 1, 2, 3. Can everybody figure out how that works pretty much so far? Are you with me? You rank them 1, 2, 3. I mean, that's pretty simple, really. It's not rocket science. So, in the first round of voting, you count the number 1 votes. And if somebody has a majority of number 1 votes, then they win. Election's over, which makes sense. If a majority supports one candidate first, they should win. But what if someone doesn't have a majority of votes? Then, in a lot of places, if no one gets a majority, they're required to have a runoff election. The problem is the runoff happens in a month, the turnout is 20%, it costs a lot of money, somebody wins, but you don't really know who the majority liked. Well, with instant runoff voting, you have your runoff election instantaneously. You take the candidate who came in last place, and they're eliminated. And you look at who their voters voted for number 2 on that ballot. Who was the second choice candidate of those voters? And you take those votes and you give them to whoever the second choice of the voters were. So go back to the example we had before with the progressive, the moderate, and the conservative. With instant runoff voting, presumably most of us would vote for the progressive first, then the moderate, then the conservative. So if the progressive comes in last, your vote would now count for that moderate candidate. So you add up the first and second choices in the next round, and whoever has a majority wins. Presumably, in that case, the moderate has a majority of first and second choice votes, and they win. And so that way, you can vote for who you really want to without the spoiler effect. And we also know who the majority really supports. It also allows more people to vote because there's no reason, more people to run for office because there's no reason not to run. It makes for campaigns more civil because if we're running against each other and I want your voters to put me second, I'm not going to smear you and call you all kinds of names. I'm going to say, well, you're a pretty good guy, but I disagree on certain things, so I can get your second choice votes. Now, instant runoff voting admittedly does help third parties, and it would be good for the Green Party. But I think it's also good for the Democrats and the Republicans as well, and it's good for our system as a whole. I mean, if you remember Florida in 2000 with Al Gore and George W. Bush and Ralph Nader, and Gore got a few less votes than Bush officially, and Ralph Nader had more than the difference. Well, if we had instant runoff voting in Florida, presumably most of the Nader voters would have listed Al Gore as their second choice. And when Nader came in last, his votes would have gone to Al Gore. He would have won Florida, and he would have been president. We would have been spared the Bush presidency. So I think right there, that alone is reason why we should have instant runoff voting. But you look at other places right now. In Hawaii recently, there was a special election for a congressional seat. This is the seat where Barack Obama was born. He actually wasn't born in Kenya or Indonesia. He was born in Hawaii. So in Hawaii, in this special election, a Republican won this seat for the first time in decades, and that surprised all the pundits. But the reason was there were two Democratic candidates running, and they split about 60% of the vote, and the Republican got 40% of the vote. Well, the Republican got more votes than either Democrat, so they were elected. But in reality, 60% of the voters wanted a Democrat to win. So it seems to me that the system we have now is fundamentally unfair when 40% of the voters want a Republican, and that's who won over the 60%. You know, but it works the other way as well, because right now in Florida, there's a three-way race for Senate. The incumbent governor, Charlie Crist, is running as an independent because the Tea Party candidate has won that is leading the Republican nomination. So the polls show that between the independent Crist and the Tea Party Republican, they're likely to get about 60% of the vote, which means the Democratic candidate is going to win with 40% of the vote. Now, if you're a hardcore Democrat, that's fine, but it seems to me on the other side, if 60% of the Florida voters want a Republican or conservative, that's who they should get. That's the representative thing there. And the 40% should not win. So with instant runoff voting, that eliminates that problem, because if 60% of the voters want a Democrat or a Republican or a moderate or whatever, that's who's going to win. So in line with the Green Party philosophy of thinking globally and acting locally, we'd like to see instant runoff voting across the country, at a state level, at a city level, but we're starting with city elections. So we formed a group called Fort Collins Ranked Voting, and we're going to be mounting an initiative campaign this summer to collect enough signatures to put a ranked voting measure on the ballot for next spring in Fort Collins. And we've done a lot of good so far. We've been going out and talking to community groups. We've gotten the endorsement of the Larimer County League of Women Voters. The Northern Colorado Central Labor Council is on board. The Associated Students of Colorado State University is on board. So those are some major endorsers. I'm pleased to say we've gotten the endorsement of both of our state representatives, John Kafalis and Randy Fisher. We'd like your endorsement. We'd like your help. We're going to need a lot of people to circulate petitions this summer. We can get a better voting system in Fort Collins, in the state and nationally, and have fair, more democratic elections, and I hope you'll support us. So thanks for your time.
I live in a dream.